Open your refrigerator right now, and you're standing in front of one of the most quietly dangerous inventions in human history. Not because it might break down, because for nearly 100 years, keeping your food cold meant filling your kitchen with gases that could kill you in your sleep. And the man who finally solved that problem was already responsible for poisoning an entire generation of children with a completely different invention. He would later die, strangled by a machine of his own design. This is the history of the refrigerator. Long before electricity, humans had already figured out how to cheat the seasons. In ancient Persia, as early as 400 BC, engineers built massive dome-shaped structures called yakchals, made from a special heat-resistant clay mortar that could withstand extreme desert temperatures. These structures rose up to 60 feet tall above ground, with much of their storage capacity hidden underground, insulated from the punishing heat outside. Ice, harvested from nearby mountains during the winter months, or even manufactured overnight using clever shallow pools and radiative cooling, could stay frozen solid through an entire brutal desert summer, sometimes for many months at a time. Persian engineers had essentially built a walk-in freezer, entirely without electricity, using nothing but clever architecture and basic physics. In parts of Africa, a much simpler method emerged centuries later, requiring no elaborate construction at all. 2 clay pots, one nested carefully inside the other, separated by a layer of constantly dampened sand. As the water in that sand slowly evaporated through the porous outer pot, it pulled heat directly away from the food stored inside the inner pot, keeping vegetables and fruit noticeably fresher for weeks, all without electricity, moving parts, or any fuel source whatsoever. These ancient solutions were genuinely clever, but they were also completely dependent on climate, geography, and constant manual labor. The idea of true mechanical, on-demand cooling, available anywhere, in any season, was still centuries away from becoming reality. The first real scientific breakthrough came in 1748 in Scotland. A professor named William Cullen at the University of Glasgow demonstrated something remarkable in his laboratory, in front of a small audience of students. He allowed a liquid called ethyl ether to boil rapidly inside a partial vacuum, and as it evaporated, it visibly cooled the air immediately surrounding it, even forming a thin layer of frost. Cullen had just proven the basic scientific principle behind every single refrigerator built since, but he never built a practical device out of it. To him, it was simply an interesting scientific demonstration worth noting in a lecture and nothing more. It took decades for anyone to turn that principle into an actual working machine. In 1805, an American inventor named Oliver Evans described, purely on paper, a closed cooling cycle that used vapor instead of liquid to move heat around. He never actually built a working version himself, leaving the concept sitting unused for nearly 30 more years. That job eventually fell to an American engineer named Jacob Perkins, a prolific inventor who already held dozens of patents across completely unrelated fields, from steam engines to banknote printing. In 1834, Perkins constructed and patented the first genuinely practical vapor compression refrigeration system in recorded history. Historians now often call him the true father of the modern refrigerator, even though his invention wouldn't reach an ordinary household for almost another 100 years. The next chapter of this story is where things turn genuinely tragic. In the early 1840s, an American physician named John Gorey was working in Apalachicola, Florida, treating patients suffering from yellow fever. Gorey believed, correctly, that cooling a patient's room could ease their suffering and improve their chances of survival. Working from Evans' original concept, he built his own mechanical ice-making machine, and by 1844 he was successfully using it to cool hospital rooms and produce ice for his patients. In 1851, he was awarded the very first United States patent for mechanical refrigeration. Gorey should have become a wealthy, celebrated man. Instead, he ran directly into the business interests of a man named Frederick Tudor, known across America as the Ice King. Tudor had built a massive, profitable empire, shipping natural ice, cut from frozen lakes in New England, to customers as far away as Cuba and India. Gorey's invention, artificial ice made anywhere on demand, threatened to destroy that entire empire overnight. Tudor responded the way powerful men often do when threatened. He launched a sustained smear campaign against Gorey, mocking his invention publicly and undermining his credibility at every opportunity. Gorey toured the American South, desperately searching for investors to help him build a proper factory. He found almost none. Broken financially and personally, John Gorey died in 1855, bankrupt and humiliated. Having never seen his invention reach the world he'd built it to help. If you're finding this story compelling, hit subscribe now. This channel uncovers hidden histories exactly like this one every single week. For decades, after Gorey's death, refrigeration technology kept improving, but it came with a serious, often deadly catch. Early refrigerators and industrial cooling systems relied on toxic, flammable gases, ammonia, methyl chloride, and sulfur dioxide, to actually do the cooling. These chemicals worked, but they leaked constantly. Throughout the 1920s, newspapers regularly reported fatal accidents caused by leaking home refrigerators. In 1929, tragedy struck on a massive scale. A refrigeration leak at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio released a cloud of toxic gas throughout the hospital. Over 100 people died. It became painfully clear that refrigeration desperately needed a safer chemical solution, and fast, before the technology could ever be trusted inside an ordinary family home. That's where Thomas Midgley Jr. enters the story, and things get complicated fast. By the time refrigeration companies came calling, Midgley was already one of the most celebrated chemists in America, and also, entirely unknowingly, one of the most dangerous men alive. Years earlier, working for General Motors under a researcher named Charles Kettering, Midgley had discovered that adding a compound called tetraethyl lid to gasoline eliminated a persistent problem called engine knock. His solution worked brilliantly, and the automotive industry embraced it almost instantly. It also released enormous quantities of toxic lead into the atmosphere for the next 50 years, contributing to widespread lead poisoning across multiple generations of children worldwide, long before anyone fully understood the consequences. Midgley himself had developed serious lead poisoning directly from his own research, badly enough that he was forced to take an extended leave of absence just to recover his health. Somehow, none of that damaged his professional reputation in the slightest. In 1930, General Motors' refrigeration division, a company called Frigidaire, turned to Midgley specifically to solve the toxic refrigerant crisis. Working with a small team of chemists, Midgley found his answer in just 3 days. A new chemical compound called dichlorofluoromethane, sold commercially under the brand name Freon. To prove to a skeptical audience that it was genuinely safe, Midgley staged a now-famous public demonstration in front of the American Chemical Society. He personally inhaled a lungful of the gas, then calmly exhaled it directly onto a lit candle, blowing out the flame to prove in front of a live audience that the gas was both non-toxic and completely non-flammable. The stunt worked perfectly, and the room reportedly erupted in applause. Freon was hailed as a genuine miracle chemical, and it quickly became the standard refrigerant used in refrigerators and air conditioners across the entire world for the next several decades. For the first time in history, a refrigerator was something you could genuinely trust to sit safely inside your kitchen. Companies like Frigidaire, Kelvinator, and General Electric raced to bring compact, self-contained refrigerators into ordinary homes. By the late 1930s, the old-fashioned icebox, which relied on literal blocks of delivered ice, had been almost entirely replaced by electric refrigerators across the United States. What had once been a luxury for the wealthy quickly became an absolute necessity for the modern household. But here's the twist: almost nobody learns in school. Decades later, scientists discovered that the exact same chlorofluorocarbons keeping food cold in refrigerators worldwide were quietly destroying the ozone layer, the fragile atmospheric shield protecting all life on Earth from dangerous ultraviolet radiation. The same molecule that once seemed like a harmless miracle turned out to be tearing a measurable hole in the sky, one refrigerator and one aerosol can at a time. In 1987, nations around the world came together to sign the Montreal Protocol, a landmark international agreement to phase out CFCs completely. It remains, to this day, widely regarded as one of the most successful environmental treaties in human history. But the damage was already done, and scientists estimate the ozone layer will need until roughly the middle of this century to fully heal. Thomas Midgley Jr. never lived to see that damage confirmed. In 1940, he contracted polio and lost the use of his legs. Determined to remain independent, the inveterate inventor designed an elaborate system of ropes and pulleys to help lift himself in and out of bed without assistance. In 1944, he was found dead, tangled and strangled in the very mechanism he had built to help himself. It was publicly reported as a tragic accident. Some historians now believe otherwise, suggesting it may in fact have been a deliberate act. Either way, the man responsible for two of the most environmentally destructive inventions of the entire 20th century had, in the end, been killed by a machine of his own making. Today, refrigerators use far safer, more climate-conscious refrigerants, and modern units are dramatically more energy efficient than anything Midgley or Perkins could have ever imagined. Nearly every household across the developed world now owns one, quietly humming in the background of daily life, running 24 hours a day, so common and so invisible that almost nobody stops to think about the twisting, genuinely dangerous history required to make it safe enough to trust. Global refrigerator ownership now numbers in the billions of units, an entire planet's food supply depending on a piece of technology that took over 200 years, several deaths, and one shredded ozone layer to finally get right. So the next time you casually open your fridge for a midnight snack, remember exactly what you're actually looking at. A Persian desert engineer's underground dome, a Scottish professor's forgotten laboratory trick, a brilliant doctor destroyed by a jealous ice tycoon, dying penniless for an idea that eventually saved millions of lives. 100 people all killed in a single hospital gas leak. and one of history's most consequential, most dangerous inventors, solving the problem perfectly on his very first attempt, only to be quietly killed years later by a machine of his own making. If this story surprised you, subscribe for more hidden histories behind the everyday objects sitting quietly in your own home. Next time, we're uncovering the mineral empire built on a rock that was never actually rare.